Good evening or good morning, wherever you may be. Thanks everyone for joining in today's fireside chat session with Miss Harumi Urata-Thompson, who will today be talking to us about CeFi versus DeFi, the hidden risks in crypto finance. So my name is Cholo Maputol. I am the CEO and co-founder of Play It Forward DAO. What is Play It Forward DAO? Just very quickly for the audience. So we are an ecosystem designed to bring in the next wave of crypto and Web3 users into the metaverse. And we use gaming to be that wedge or the tip of the spear to bring that adoption. Our mission is to make play more rewarding by bringing more financial and earning opportunities for our players, and at the same time helping them get educated around how they can maximize these earnings that they make through their journey with the Play It Forward ecosystem. So in the spirit of the education thrust of Play It Forward, we're very pleased and very privileged to have with us today, as I mentioned, Ms. Harumi Urata-Thompson, founder and CEO of HUT Consulting. And what we share in common is actually we have a career that straddles both traditional finance and what they call DeFi. For myself, kind of GameFi, and she has experience with CeFi as well. A lot of these terms kind of like thrown up in the air, but I would say what they have in common is they provide an alternative to traditional banking. And we're going to be talking about that throughout today's fireside chat. But before that, of course, I'll hand the floor over to Harumi so that she can introduce herself, her background, and also what they do at HUT Consulting. And then we'll dive straight into the fireside chat. So Harumi, the floor is yours.
Cholo, thank you very much. And then first of all, thank you very much for providing me this opportunity to talk with you and to your community people about the general education of what this industry is, where it's going. This is a big passion of mine, as we are both CFA charter holders, and in financial literacy, it's such an important topic to make sure that everybody has something to kind of move forward with in order to secure our world, so to speak. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. As Cholo has introduced me I'm the CEO of HUT Consulting, where I advise mainly small companies to operate better. And then nowadays, a lot of companies are something around Web3. I'm also an advisor to a number of those companies so that I can leverage my experience by having been an executive of a couple of different crypto companies in the past. And also having my traditional finance experience, I can draw the simile or where I think the Web3 should be going in order for us to continue getting the benefits of what's coming out of this development, this technology development, and the benefits that it provides. So I'm very excited to be talking about things like CeFi, DeFi, traditional finance today, and talk about my thoughts on what we could be doing, what we should be doing, and then how we should be approaching overall our finance and things of that nature.
Awesome. Amazing. So why don't we kick things off? And like for those in the audience that are not so familiar with the differences with all these terms, perhaps we can start off with a quick overview of CeFi versus DeFi for the audience who are not so familiar. And also, I guess, talk about some of the advantages that this type of technology possess or have over TradFi.
Absolutely, Cholo. I think it's a great idea, as people have different definitions. If there are 100 people in the room, probably there will be 100 slightly different kind of definitions for all these words that we are throwing around today, as you said. So I think for the benefit of our discussion today, I will state where I think all these words are going. So when this blockchain-based financial services started, CeFi and DeFi, I believe most of the people are using slightly differently than how we use it today. CeFi was really literally the centralized finance, or more of the traditional, what we call TradFi, the traditional finance, the very much of a centralized finance, or the companies that have the centralized operational people management, and then operating the traditional finance. DeFi just means decentralized finance, meaning the financial services that were using the decentralized, the ledger technology. That's what the DeFi meant. A few years ago, when what we know as DeFi today began to really emerge and then play a huge part in this blockchain economy, the basically smart contract based protocols and whatnot, the CeFi has begun to mean more about the companies that are operating on blockchain but do have centralized management and doing things like lending and whatnot. And DeFi began to mean more about the companies with smart contracts, protocols with smart contracts, and have more things out of human hands, for lack of better words. This is what I see personally, where the definition is going, and I'm sure everybody's definition varies something around that. But that's basically what I'm going to base my discussion based on. And the TradFi obviously is what we used to call CeFi, which means the centralized financial services that are operating in the traditional world, the companies that we quote unquote bank with and that are regulated and have the insurance and whatnot today.
Gotcha. And that's really very interesting because it does offer kind of differentiated models around essentially a layer of kind of like execution and settlement on top of essentially like a core need, which is to be able to better manage our finances and better manage our money. So I guess that's really and that's really comes to the core of like when an investor looks at this space, how do they choose which protocol? Because ultimately for us as investors, it does have real world financial impact because we are staking or putting aside our savings, and we've seen a lot of turmoil and some of the quote unquote CeFi, as we call it today, and DeFi projects have been going through some challenges. There's been a spate of, I would say, kind of like failures, so to speak, across the industry. How do we as investors navigate that, and how do we kind of like minimize our risk when we look at these protocols? What should be how do we kind of differentiate between them?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And so let's, and it actually had a lot of components in that question that you just stated, Cholo. So let's kind of start small, almost like a backwards, and then kind of talk about what we think about when we look at the CeFi, what we are looking at the CeFi, what we are looking at the DeFi as we have it today, and then also when we might invest. There are several different ways we could invest into these companies, right? So let's talk about some things. And just I think we need to remind everyone that Cholon and I are talking here as friends and people who are deeply involved in Web3, and neither one of us are financial advisors, although we are both CFA charter holders. So I think that's something that needs to be stated throughout this call, just so that we are compliant, right, Cholo? All right, so first of all, let's talk about what we are looking at when we look at the CeFi DeFi. So I mean, and then also traditional finance. When you say like, I'm going to invest into a company, or if I'm going to put some kind of money into investment, right? I mean, you can go as small as finding one equity or one cryptocurrency, one bond, whatever it is, and then you put your money into it, and then you let it sit there. Or you could invest into the company itself. Right. I mean, investing into equity, indeed, if you're talking about the public company like Apple, Google, then putting the money into equity itself, you could say you're investing into a company. But also, like, especially if you're dealing with a private company side, which is what all the Web3 companies are today, then you could be putting the money into the series of different levels of, like what we call pre-seed, Series A, Series B. Basically, you're literally putting the money into the company. And so, there are several different styles of investment that you could be doing. And then, of course, there are certain institutions on the blockchain side where it's not a bank account, but you might be putting the money into various different wallets, right? And then you might be getting a return or rewards, as we call it, as the industry people call it. You might be earning rewards on the money that you put in your wallet. So, I mean, there are several different investments that you could be making. So let's keep that in mind. Now, I mean, when you look at different phase companies, the public companies, the DeFi companies, but the CeFi and then the DeFi companies, you're really looking at different aspects of the companies in order to make the investment decisions. So when you're looking at the public companies, there are loads of information out there, and then all these public companies have an obligation to file certain filings publicly. So you can find a lot of information that are out there on the social media, on the website, the company website, and also like in public filings. All this information you can find, and then I'm sure if you're working with a financial advisor, they can also provide you a company's spec as part of your thinking about, maybe I want to buy an equity of this company, or I want to put into this funds. So that's that. Now, when you're talking about blockchain-based companies, whether you're talking about CeFi or DeFi, and then if you're thinking about putting the money in whatever the form of instruments that you're looking at, there's several different things that you need to look at, because there's no readily available information package that you can just go download, right? So I think generally what we are calling CeFi, you can more easily find the management team, about the management team, or what kind of products that they might have, because these are by definition CeFi, the centralized group, and then there are like the management that might be running certain products and whatnot. DeFi, because it's very much more smart contract based, you can know the differences between the different protocols by going into different companies' website and whatnot. But you really kind of have to learn how to use things like MetaMask and learn more about how the smart contract works, because it's not one of those things where you can talk to somebody and say, wait, give me 1 minute, don't liquidate me yet, right? I mean, it's a very different dynamics that you're dealing with. So as you start putting the money into different segments in the financial services, you really need to know the differences. That said, this is something that this wasn't a part of the question, but this is something very important. So I will say this: diversification of where you put your money. And then again, and I'm not a financial advisor, neither is Cholo, but it's something very, very important. And then you need to be cognizant of not put money all into one bucket, right? Even if you're putting it into what you think is the most trustworthy source. Economy changes very fast today. It's a very challenging macro environment. So you never know what could happen to that particular institution or stock or bond that you're entrusting and putting all their money into. So, always think in so I really want to put a lot of money in here, but maybe like I'm going to set aside this much money and then put it into something else. Those are the things that you should be cognizantly thinking about. So I think that's what I'm going to leave with for the big question that Cholo asked for me to start on this rampage of what it means to look at the different investment targets and how to diversify your money.
And I think that's a great point around diversification, which is a very, I would say not again, we're not financial advisors, but it's very much a closely held wisdom within traditional finance, that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I guess it kind of like highlights the importance of what you mentioned, Harumi, like looking under the hood, understanding what is driving returns, what is driving a business model, whether it's for a stock, it's for a protocol, for a bank, or a CeFi platform. And what we've seen is that actually, if we really look under the hood of most of these CeFi platforms, there's a lot of shared counterparty risk, so to speak. And they lend to a lot of similar counterparties, but then also these counterparties engage in very different businesses. Some are hedge funds, some are market makers, some are miners. And would you say, like, how would you kind of like are certain counterparties better or worse, or certain counterparties safer? You always think about credit risk in that kind of instance. Is that, I guess that's something that's also, as I pointed out, with a DeFi protocol, with fairly great degree of certainty who the end borrower is, whereas for CeFi it's not so clear. And I guess maybe the question is in two parts, like what sort of activities in terms of borrowers, what kind of activities are safer, more sustainable, and also what more can Web3 from a transparency standpoint do to be able to attract more risk-averse investors and players?
So I think, first, I think I will address that question with this. I think right now it's not a secret that the blockchain-based economy is still very much at the growth stage. It's in the infancy level still, and not the it does not necessarily have all of the infrastructure that the traditional finance side is, even without thinking that they are enjoying to use these systems, however antiquated and old they may be. They do have the luxury of being able to use the infrastructure that has been built over the course of years. This is also another thing that I always say whenever I address the emerging technology aspect of like an economy that we have. With many other what we call emerging technologies today, we actually had a luxury of being able to spend number of years before they got to what we see as emerging technology today. For example, things like artificial intelligence or space economy. I mean, all these things, because like we were not necessarily talking about it back in 80s, let's say. We don't necessarily think about how long it took this artificial intelligence thing to grow up and be the adult that it is today in the room. And we still kind of bucket it as emerging technology, right? But the first sort of like computing, and then first, if you think about it, first the first sort of rocket launch into the space, all these things actually happened back in the 60s. So these other, what we call emerging technologies, had the luxury of 40 years, 50 years to grow up before they are exposed to us the way they are today. However, blockchain is only 13 years old. But because of the way the startup scene works and information is exchanged, it had to grow up really, really fast. I mean, it did not have to grow up fast, but it ended up growing up very fast, which means that there are more growing pain that industry and the parties involved will go through, because not necessarily all of the growth that are needed to come along with the technology growth itself didn't necessarily have the time to grow up with it, or for the involved parties to think through, okay, in order for me to do this, all these infrastructure still needs to be built. So a lot of work is still done manually, right? And then when we all know that manual work is tough, to say the least. So, I think one of the fundamental things that I think we're going to take away from the current economy that we're going through right now, as the crypto lending and a lot of sort of CeFi, there are a lot of issues around the CeFi in the Web3 at the moment. This is not going to be the end of CeFi, so to speak. And then there are still a lot of other companies that are maybe slightly quieter or slightly behind in terms of like, the size or the well-knownness of the company. But there are a lot of companies that are in the field and then trying to get all of those growth to come together. So behind the scene, all these actions are taking place. It's just that it's so easy to talk about a company that had billions of dollars, and it's so flashy for the media to talk about, oh, so and so is going through a financial crisis. So, I mean, I think that's what you are going to be spotting for some time to come. But we need to remember that, first of all, this technology is still growing. And with the growth comes with a lot of additional technologies that are going to come in to support how this technology is going to continue growing. So it's like one of those things that I speak even on the consultation terms, what kind of area should the next investment money go into and stuff of that nature. I know that I have shifted your question a little bit, Cholo, but I thought that it was very important to address, what it is that we are looking at and why we are in the place where we are today, because we are still growing and we need to give it a little bit more time before proper growth, all of the proper growth to catch up. I think that's something to say about the Web3 blockchain economy growth. Now, yeah, I mean, because DeFi and CeFi do have a very different business model, it is definitely, and then on the DeFi side, because every transaction is on blockchain, and there are no for a lack of better words, kind of like a management flavor to go in before any kind of decisions are made, right? If certain levels are reached, whether we're talking about margin call or whatever it is, if you are at the level where you're going to be liquidated, you're going to be liquidated. If you're going to be called for margin call, you're going to be called for margin call. And nobody but you are responsible to make sure that it happens, to make sure that smart contract registers all of those activities, right? The CeFi, because you are communicating, people are communicating with each other. Yes, there are certain things that are not as transparent as it is on the DeFi side. And then I do think, yes, that it is on the company to a certain extent that, until such time that there are more infrastructure that actually people can use to see where the company's financial status is and stuff like that, it is also on the management of the company to continue trying to do the right thing for those companies that are doing the right thing, and make sure that we communicate and we disclose and we become more transparent. It's very hard to do all of that while managing a company that is growing at the really rapid pace. But I think, things like this where we all have to slow down a little bit and think about what it is that we can do to improve what we have been doing. I think that's where we are going next.
And I think that's interesting. And you rightly pointed out that I guess we are still very much in kind of the hockey stick phase of growth. So as Urata pointed out, I think it's a great word to describe it. It's growing pains. And growing pains always kind of like result in a lot of lessons. And if I think from a TradFi background, what is the space kind of missing with regards to consumer and customer protection? There's a number of things, right? One is insurance companies and then FDIC, that kind of like insurance does exist and provides a great deal of comfort for investors that they don't lose everything. They may lose a bit if there's a bank run, but there's kind of like a baseline level of like loss given default, for example. And on that vein as well, there is in TradFi a concept of credit rating, like where you have it's essentially tied to the transparency aspect you mentioned, but essentially there are kind of like outfits like rating agencies that look at the whole balance sheet of a company and assess that they are of this certain type of creditworthiness or this type of creditworthiness. So as a consumer, you can kind of rank companies. It's not a perfect ranking for sure, but it does give a relative assessment of which companies are riskier and which outfits are riskier. And I feel that's what's still missing in CeFi and DeFi. We don't have a kind of like a reference point by which protocols are healthier, which projects are healthier. And do you see that kind of being the next phase of development for this market to really bring in the next wave of adoption? Like what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will address the credit aspect first, and then I'll go to sort of regulation, the protection side next, right? So the credit side, believe it or not, I like all these the CeFi companies that are in the say like crypto lending business and stuff like that. All these companies, degree of difference, of course, but do have certain sort of internal credit check mechanism. But again, it doesn't have all these things build based on the experience and what you need, what you need to apply, what you need to check, and then what you can also check, right? Again, a lot of counterparties of the crypto side, as opposed to the traditional finance side, a lot of companies are also the counterparties, the private companies. So it's not quite like you can go download the financials from an official download place and see what the financial economics of this company is. So you have to, it really comes down to the experience of the credit officers, right? I mean, talking to them, looking at whatever the limited financials that a company can provide, looking at the management of the company, like what kind of track record that they have they done indeed something like this before, do they come from a very different place, what kind of business line is the whole company in, is this just a small part of that counterparty, or is this the whole business of the counterparty, where is the money going and how is that going to be used, how is that going to be really protected, even if there's a collateral against it. You still want to make sure that you don't come to a point where you are going to be liquidating each other's position, right? So you want to make sure that what it is that is going to protect that loan that they might take, or whatever the relationship that we take, where is it going next. So it really comes down again, very much of a manual work. There's no guideline, there's no a specific guideline, there's nothing, no place where we can go to download all the information. So that's something that on the credit side we have to do. And having been the management of one of those companies, it's something that I know we do, and then I know we did, and we try to do as much as that we can. And some companies more successful than some others. So I think it's something that we need to almost be able to share as the best practice, what it is that that went well, what it is that didn't work, and then build almost like an industry-wide knowledge base in order to get to the right infrastructure to be built. I think that's on the credit side what we need to do. So yes, so I think for the short answer, the industry has been doing it. Is it perfect? Even the traditional finance side, right? I mean, it's very frequent that you do lose counterparts, and that's why things like collateralized debt obligations, collateralized mortgage obligations, things like that exist, because you know that with a certain sort of certainty, like certain percentage certainty, certain loans are not going to be paid back, right? But the difference between TradFi side and Web3 side is that because the TradFi side has number of years of experience and knowledge, we can be with certain sort of a level of certainty that we know what the default rate is going to be. So we can have a big enough pool and we can be ready for that. On the Web3 side, we are not quite there yet. Time will only resolve this issue. Now, I think we said that we're going to, so now let's talk about the protection side. So on the protection side, what are we going to do? In short of having enough pools of that nature and start kind of building almost internal protection, right? I mean, the collateral, sort of create another kind of vehicle to protect the company itself. What can we do? Yeah, I mean, things like having things like FDIC definitely is one of the solutions, but it's, like I said, it's only one of the solutions, because just by providing it, I mean, we have to think about where is the money coming from. I mean, what it is that we are going to do to make sure that FDIC is not getting drawn all the time. Can we do anything else to protect ourselves? First of all, what it is that we're going to have to demand on every company in the business to make sure that it's not going to get there, right? So I think the regulation development, along with thinking about how to protect these companies, will have to go hand in hand to make sure that we are making sure that there's that last thing that we can draw, such as FDIC insurance or some kind of insurance, but make sure that we are not going to get there by having good built-in checking mechanism and good regulations to follow and certain compliance that we are complying to. All these things need to develop. That's a lot of work. And the people who are in the industry, there are only so many of us still. We all need to be working together to make sure that we have all that we are going to be able to provide that kind of insight to in the right hands, so that the right regulations will be built, right insurance products will be built. Because at the end of the day, also, and I'm going to address a little bit about insurance. The insurance premium is decided basically on two factors: the frequency of happening and the magnitude of how it happens. And in the crypto world, we still don't have enough examples. And if we're going to take only in a recent incidents, it's going to be only too big for any companies to want to insure. It's not going to be always like this, right? So we need to make sure that while the insurance industry develops with the right data for them to be able to come out with the right insurance products, we all need to work together to make sure that industry operates more in line with, I'm not saying that the traditional finance does everything right, but sort of like, we need to adopt what they do right, so that in the Web3 world, we are going to be able to make sure that we can provide the best service to our consumer clients and, of course, the institutional clients as well.
I think that's a great answer, and it kind of like touches on multiple facets of like risk management. And I think ultimately where I would say one of the differentiators between the successful and the not so successful projects has been the focus on risk management. And I would say that as an investor, like that's one of the key items to kind of really look for. And I guess maybe like one of the some of the last questions as well. Um, I would say that we kind of got here because there's a lot of hidden contagion risk in the market that we didn't realize. Again, a lot of shared counterparties, a lot of like cross exposures. And then really we got here because there was a big hunt for yield, and these protocols and these projects or companies were offering yields of upwards of 8%, 6 to 8%, and packaging it as a guaranteed deposit, which again, of course, it under the hood it wasn't. There are financial instruments right now in the traditional finance market, especially with rates going up, that offer similar or even better yields than the protocols, but are often out of reach for normal investors because they're KYC gated. You need to be a certain net worth. Is there a future where actually Web3 can bridge that access problem, where you can essentially offer this type of yields from a more, to your point, diversified source of earnings to still kind of like have a more balanced book, so to speak? So you're not only just exposed to kind of like liquidations when asset price volatility goes up, or you're just only exposed to one side of the market. So I mean that maybe your thoughts there as we kind of like close off.
Absolutely. So first of all, yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to address something a little bit different, and then I'm going to come back to your question of if we can. So, I also worked on a financial turnaround in the past, and then I said, where I stand, sort of a person who looks at the business from financial and an operational point of view, right? Running the company, it's going to come out slightly wrong, but let me say it first, and then I'll explain what it means. I said, it's very easy to manage a company because at the end of the day, it's basically revenue minus cost equals profit. This truth is a universal truth, and then as long as you can keep that in mind, revenue always has to be higher than the cost in order for the company to keep existing, meaning being able to have the profit at the end of the day. That's something that you need to keep in mind, as long as you can operate based on that. And you're not going to be dealing with a situation where you're going to go bankruptcy, right? But of course, there are a lot of different circumstances. And then now I'm going to explain what that really means. For example, for the startup companies where you're expected not to have profit, especially at the beginning, this formula doesn't necessarily apply in a sense. But generally speaking, if you continue having the negative number on the right side of that formula forever and ever and ever, I mean, no, it doesn't matter how much money you raise, you're not going to be able to operate a company, even as a startup, let alone if you're traditional companies that have been out there for a number of years. So I think, to me, it's something to be mindful of. I mean, is it always the right answer to cut costs? It's not necessarily the answer. So at some point you do have to kind of bite the bullet and say, I cut as much cost as I can. What else can we do with the revenue? Because when I did the financial round, rather than focusing on the cost, one thing that I did was to kind of introduce a new business model, raise new funds, fresh funds, and whatnot. So I really focused on the revenue side, and I was very fortunate that I was able to make that happen. So given that very simple formula that we can keep in mind, which we're not always going to be able to stick to, let's coming back to what is happening right now in the industry. And then let's say what we can go in order for us to be able to enjoy like in different ways we can deploy cryptocurrency, so the cryptocurrencies are not going to be the slave of the volatility, as you said, Cholo, of this cryptocurrencies movement in order for us to continue yielding on them, right? So first of all, I think because we got a little bit into who can pay higher, sort of like a competition in the industry. I think it put enormous pressure on so many companies that put way too many companies that shouldn't be under that kind of pressure to kind of get into that game of somebody's paying this much. I need to up that by 0.5%. Right, and that is not a good place to be. I mean, it's always good to have a healthy competition. Don't mark me wrong. It's always good to have a competition. So it's great that we have competition going. But if not at the cost of forever and ever not being able to even look at the revenue minus cost equals profit formula, right? So let's keep that in mind, that kind of like competition actually got us to a very difficult place. And then now, what can we do in order to bring the revenue side of that first formula that I brought up, and then add more to revenue, like without just relying on the volatility of the cryptocurrency for the Web3 companies. So what is happening out there in the industry is that a lot of companies are beginning to look at various different licenses and registrations that they can get to. I mean, it's going to be costly. It's going to be costly, especially for small companies, and then it's going to take some time. So the development is going to go slower than probably like some of the founders like to see, because we all like to see money coming in rather than going out, and resources being utilized for the for lack of better words, expense side of the work than the revenue side of the work. That said, by being able to operate sort of like a crossover way with the traditional finance, Cholo, coming back to your initial question, we're going to be able to utilize a lot more instruments where the money, whatever is on the asset side of the balance sheet we have, we can deploy to a lot of more variety of products. Diversification, we talked about the diversification. So we are going to be able to diversify where the coins go in order to get that yield, as more and more companies start operating in that sort of hybrid segment. It's not just a pure traditional finance, it's not just a pure cryptocurrency, but something hybrid. And we are going to be able to obviously we are going to be able to leverage that the good volatility of the cryptocurrency Web3 side, but also being able to put some of the money more into the financial, the traditional financial services side instruments, and take advantage when they offer certain yields or certain sort of a little bit more stability maybe, and be able to operate the company in a more stable manner. So I think that is my answer to your question, Cholo. Can we? Absolutely. I think a lot of companies in the industry are beginning to get themselves to be ready. I don't think they're thinking about that just yet, but they're getting their infrastructure ready to go to that direction if and when they choose to do so.
I think that's I personally agree that that's kind of the direction we're headed. It will take time, and as you mentioned, Harumi, there's going to be a lot of regulatory aspects that need to be ironed out. But I would say that's one approach that will potentially make the whole space more sustainable. So I think we're just coming up on kind of like a 40-minute mark, and it's been a great and insightful chat, Harumi. I think especially for our players who are more often than not just really starting out on their journey in terms of financial literacy. Again, they are really just trying to figure out the space, and maybe kind of like some concluding thoughts on what you would leave with them as we look at the next kind of like 12 to 18 months of potentially tricky markets. Like what would be like the top things to keep in mind so that they are able to continue to accumulate and benefit financially without taking too much risk and really going into the space with our eyes wide open.
Absolutely, absolutely, Cholo. Thank you for that great question. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's no question that we are going to have to weather the storm for some time to come, and it is our money at the end of the day, right? I mean, I know it's my hard earned money, it's Cholo's hard earned money, it's your hard earned money, and then we want to make sure that we do have, at some point we're going to be able to kind of think about retirement and have a great life, and after sort of like the professional life is when we choose to finish it too. So we want to make sure that the money will work for us, rather than the other way around. But how do we really kind of weather the storm? I think we all need to remember that all the economy cycles, right? I mean, there's top time, there's a bottom time, and then there's like sort of in between time every time. And so when we are at the sort of when we are going through a challenging period, this is not the end. The good time will come back. How do we defend ourselves though? Right? I mean, while we are going through a hard time, I think especially with the people who have experienced a duration of very, very good economy, we get into the habit of buying or investing when the market is going up, and then selling when the market is coming down. It's not necessarily wrong to kind of change the position based on the economy, and then make sure that you get into somewhat defensive position when the economy starts going bad, and sort of vice versa. But also we need to remember that by having a diversified portfolio always, we don't have to necessarily do all of the buys as the market goes up, and then all of the sells as the market goes down. So if I want you to walk away with one concept and one concept only, and then that is constantly think about how can you make your portfolio a little bit more diversified, your personal position, right? So that it's going to be ready when the market starts going up, but also you can defend yourself when the market starts going down without going crazy, and without potentially risking everything that you've got. I think that's something that I like all of you to walk away with if you're thinking about your personal wealth. And again, neither one of us are financial advisor, but it's something that as friends and as fellow community members, we can kind of discuss and definitely kind of remind each other what it is that we need to be thinking about with our own money.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's really in times like this, really diversification, and kind of like spreading kind of like your positions across multiple things. Because again, with this kind of like uncertain markets, you never know which one is gonna kind of like outperform, and that's always a good thing to just have that kind of hedge from an investment standpoint. So yeah, I think look, it's been a great chat. Harumi, it's a great insights. I'm sure that our audience learned a lot, and I'm sure that if there are any questions that come through post this, we'll make sure to get it across and get your insights on that. And then, yeah, I think ultimately what we want to kind of establish and continue to do is educate our community around concepts like this that are maybe adjacent to GameFi, but not necessarily directly impacting. But it's something that if they understand better, it can help them on their journey. So really, thank you very much on behalf of the community. It was a great talk, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue and learning from you even more.
Absolutely great. I mean, thank you again so much, Cholo, for letting me come and speak in front of your community members. I always really enjoy doing this kind of educational events as a fellow Web3 deep in participant. And I love to get to know your project as well as what everybody's involved, so that we can all grow up together. So thank you so much.
Amazing. Awesome. Thanks, Rumi. And for all our audience, that brings us to the close of today's Fireside Chat. If you would like to know more about either Play It Forward or Hut Consulting, please feel free to reach out, have our socials, or if you wanted to speak to Harumi directly, we're always happy to facilitate. But that brings us to the end, and very much look forward to our next Fireside Chat. Thanks very much, Harumi, and have a good morning ahead.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.